Hi guys, Mrs. Clark here. I just want to go over with you something that has a lot to do with the numbers we've been working with lately, which is what rational numbers are. If you look at this visual in front of you here, it kind of helps out to give you the idea of just what type of numbers would be considered rational numbers. Rational numbers are basically numbers, any number that can be written as a fraction. That means with a numerator and a denominator. So if you look at this visual right now, if we go all the way around the outside, you can see 5/8, that's a fraction, obviously a rational number. Negative 5/10 right here. Again, also negative 5/10, yes, it's a decimal, but if you were to write that as a fraction, you would start by saying negative 5/10, which simplifies to negative 1/2. That's a fraction, therefore a rational number. This one, which is 333 thousandths, you may say, oh, those digits repeat. If they're predictably repeating, then that actually can be written as a fraction, and that's something that we can go over at another time. But a repeating decimal, or always a terminating decimal, but a repeating decimal with a predictable pattern would also be considered a rational number. Okay, 41/100ths, again, those digits in 41/100ths, they actually do repeat. So that is a repeating decimal, which means that it is a rational number. Let's see. There is one over here that I can't see. I think it's 48/100ths, and 48/100ths again can be written as a fraction unsimplified, 48/100, and then simplify that down so it is considered a fraction, which then means it's a rational number. 1/10 right here, again, that can be written as a fraction, 1/10, 1/10, and then simplify it. 75/100ths, 75/100, simplify it down. Again, but it can still be written in an unsimplified fraction form, which means that it is definitely a rational number. Okay? Any integers, which are any positive or negative whole numbers, are definitely going to be rational numbers. Okay? Any other whole numbers, again, are going to fall under rational numbers. So if you look at this, you may say, Mrs. Clark, that's a fraction, negative 8/4, but if you simplify it in its simplest form, you would get 2/1. You divide both of these parts of this fraction by 4, okay, and it would give you negative 2/1, which is the same as negative 2. You could also look at this as division, as we learned today. Negative 8/4, divide your numerator by your denominator, so divide negative 8 by positive 4. Negative 8 divided by 4, you get an answer of negative 2, okay, so negative 2 is definitely an integer, and that's why it falls in the integers, but that's why this right here, even in fraction form, makes this a rational number. This over here, that means when you see that little symbol in front of the 36, that stands for the square root of 36. And when you're asked about the square root of 36, what they're asking is what number times itself gives you 36, and the answer would be 6. So that's why the square root of 36 would be in the whole number category here. Obviously, 5 is a whole number. 12/4, if you divided 12 by 4, you get 3. 3 is definitely a whole number. So hopefully this makes it a little bit easier for you to understand what type of numbers fall under the rational number category. Any number that can be written in fraction form would be considered a rational number. Even repeating decimals would be considered rational numbers, okay? So the only type of numbers that would be considered irrational is when you have a repeating decimal that goes on and on and on, but the numbers are unpredictable. You can't find a pattern. They don't repeat, okay? The most famous irrational number is pi. And I mean 3.14. That is the most famous irrational number that we use quite a bit in math, okay? Hopefully this kind of clarifies what makes a rational number. We're going to work with them now.